Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm gonna just say a quick comment about the background checks. Unless we have major questions about it, I'm gonna tell you what I know at this point. And then we're gonna turn it over to Kelli, unless there's some things that Erica needs to speak about. I'm not sure if she had anything that she wanted to go over. No, okay. So a slight update to what was sent to you guys last week that I just found out about yesterday, that we're still trying to figure out what it's going to look like. So we got an email from teacher certification saying that some people had reached out asking questions about my email, or the email that was sent out through Erica from me about the background checks and last week's end of week um, email that goes out. So teacher certification clarified with us that they don't have jurisdiction over, or the way they put it was, they don't have jurisdiction over background checks for volunteers. And so they solely handle background checks for people who are paid through any kind of federal or state funds. So that would be staff of a 21st Century Center, or any contracted vendors, anybody that you're paying to come provide a service for your 21st Century Center. So that's where those background checks do. That process for those people is still going to be the same as what was said in last week's email. But they don't want to do volunteers because they said that's just not their jurisdiction. I've spoken to Dr. Killingsworth, which, as most of you probably know, is the director of federal programs, about this. And we both agree that if an adult is serving as a volunteer and they're working with the students one-on-one, or working directly with students in a group, basically, like I said in that email last week, if they could touch a child, then they still need to have a background check. It's just not going to go through teacher certification, but it still needs to be a fingerprinted background check. The question I had for her, and that we're not sure what the answer to at this moment is who, so if you run that background check and it comes back saying that that person does have a criminal history, then whose job is it to decide whether the criminal history that's listed on that background check is enough or serious enough to say that this person shouldn't be around children? So, for example, one was sent to me from one of the CBOs a couple of weeks ago before we even found out about the teacher certification situation. And it said that this person had written bad checks, and that they had some probation violations. And it didn't say what the probation was for. It just said they had a situation happen with a bad check, and it did, that's all it said was bad checks, probation violation. And it was sent to me, is this okay? And I'm like, I do not want to make that decision. So that's our concern at this point, is who, like, if it runs through teacher certification, there's someone with teacher certification that checks that and says, yes, they're fine, or no, they're not fine. But who is supposed to check it, if we don't run it through teacher certification? So we've reached out to Tiffany Kessler with Brewman, just to ask her opinion, her legal opinion, of what she thinks, should be the answer there. Should it just be we allow the LEA or the CBO to make that decision of whether they feel comfortable with that person working with the students, or what? So she said her response, that was earlier today, her response so far has just been, let me do a little bit of background research about this and I'll get back to you. So that's so far all I know. So as soon as I find out more, I will update everyone. But again, background checks, you still need to have any of your staff and any vendors who are paid with 21st Century funds. They still would need to do the background check through teacher certification, using, you can use the instructions that were sent last week, or going through your LEA's instructions. But for volunteers that frequently work with students and work one-on-one with kids, even our worry is, like, even a situation where you have another adult in the room who who is certified or whatever, if that adult goes to the bathroom and, you know what I mean, and is left with those kids alone, what could happen during that time? So even a situation like that, that's what we're concerned with. So as soon as I find out more information, I will either send it through Eric or I'll send it out myself, information about what is decided about that. So I see a question popping up about high school students. Hold on a second. High school students getting paid as aides are fine because they're still part of the system. It's just once they graduate, that's when you have an issue. So a question I think came up either yesterday or last week, about what happens with like a student who graduates, who's been working with 21st Century and they're going to graduate this fall, but they were going to help with summer programs. Do they have to have a background check? They're 18 or older, and the answer would be yes. If you're paying them to work with 21st Century and they're now an adult and they're no longer a high school student, technically, then they would still need to get that background check done, but not until they've graduated. You're welcome. So unless there's any other questions about that, I'll give it a second. I know some people have expressed concern about having some vendors that don't want to provide those background checks. And if that's the case, then you don't need to work with that vendor any longer. That's a concern. They're not willing to do that just to make sure that, you know, we're providing the kids with safe adults to be around. So we need to reach out and try to find somebody else to provide that service if that's the case. So, okay, I don't see any other questions popping up. And if anything else does, you know, if you think of something while Kelly's going through her presentation, then we can address it at the end. I'm going to be listening and working on EGAP applications while Kelly does her presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to her.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Kelly Smith, and several of you might have attended or you might not have attended the presentation from last week. But what I actually did was just put together some unit plans or instructions, so to speak, so that you could take those instructions and give them out to your faculty and staff. If you think this is something that you would like more PD on, it's something I could want to focus in on just your site or your school system or CBO, I'd be glad to set up a time where I could just do a Zoom call with everybody if they have questions and so forth. So what my goal is with this was just to kind of let you know what a unit plan was and just to help in planning with lessons and trying to make it honestly easier for your teachers as they go forward with summer, spring plan. So I am going to share my presentation and I'm going to move through it pretty quickly, but if you guys have questions, feel free to stop me, yell, whatever it is you want. And I can also pass this out or send it to Erica and she can get it out to you guys afterwards. So this is unit planning. This is one of my most favorite things to do when I was an elementary teacher. I love to sit down and look at the whole year and to identify things that we can do to help with the cross-curricular studies. So what is a unit plan? It is just a framework that helps you and it guides teachers throughout the learning process. So there's some things to think about as you guys begin with unit planning. I know that several CBOs and after school care programs might chunk or put their groups of students in various grade levels because you might not have enough teachers for kindergarten or you might not have enough teachers just for fourth grade. So that is something that you guys should think about. Here's just some examples. You can chunk them like K3, 4, 6, 7, 9, 10, 12. Some people do more of maybe a K5 or 2, 4, that type of thing. It doesn't really matter as long as you kind of have some similar age levels together. You know, obviously you don't want to put a third grader with a ninth grader. Another thing to think about is your content area. When I started this, I would think about just some big concepts. What are big science concepts to think about that I could bring in different content areas in, or social studies? And then what current resources do you have on hand that could help you with teaching these areas? So, first thing to do, step one, is to choose your grade level, which is what we just talked about, and then pick your content area. And then the next thing is going to be to choose a standard and then identify keywords. So let's talk about standards. If you all should be familiar with the Alabama course of study, and I have a link on here that you can go to, but it is under Alabama Achieves, under academic standards. And if you just scroll down, you can find all of the different standards with all the different content areas. So I just happened to go to science because I think that science lends itself well to cross-curricular studies. You can always bring in reading and math and food and all kinds of other things when it comes to that. So I pulled up the current one, which is the 2023, and just scrolled down to one of the grade levels and chose a science concept, and I'll show you that in just a second. But Alabama Achieves is where you go for your standard. Obviously, you always need to bring things back to what is the standard? What is something that you should be teaching? Not just, well, let me just learn about, I don't know, spring flowers or something like that. Like bring it back to what is a standard, or what is a content area that needs to be taught. So here's a great example. I went to the science course of study, like I said, and I chose science. And the grade levels that were in my after school class range were fourth to sixth. And this is all made up, but those are the students that would be in there. So I looked at the fifth grade standard. You could always look at fourth, you could look at sixth as well. Um, but the fifth grade standard was there's like a bigger heading, and then there's the standard underneath. So the bigger heading on the fifth grade course of study was Earth's place in the universe. And the actual standard was to analyze data that reveal patterns of daily changes in length and direction of shadows, day and night, phases of the moon, seasonal appearance of some stars in the night sky. This is a huge standard. There are lots of different things in this standard that need to be broken down and taught. You don't have to, this will never be taught in one day. So the yellow words is something that I do, where I pick out what really are these students needing to know. So on the next slide, what I did was to develop a word concept map, and I took all those specific words: direction, length, day, night, shadows, moon phases, and so forth. What are these things that students actually need to know in order to apply the standard, in order to demonstrate that they know and understand seasonal appearance of the stars? So, for example, direction. There are other words that we could add to that: up, down, north, south, east, west. Length. How is length measured? Is it in centimeters, millimeters? What does length mean? Is it tall? Is it short? Obviously, night and day is that. But I mean, when you think about it, where are stars? When do you see stars? Is it in the night, or is it during the day? Shadows. Any other words that go with shadows? They might want to say like a dark spot, or something that has to do with the sun, different types of moon phases, etc. So you take this word concept map, and then you draw more lines off of each one to think about all the different things that students need to know about those specific concepts. What are patterns? Different types of patterns: AB pattern, AA pattern, and so forth. So step 3 of unit planning would be to now think about your other content areas. So you've got your words, you got your standard, you got your words broken down. And then you think about the content areas that go along. So what are some reading books that can be brought in? What type of math problems can we do? What are some writing journal areas? How could students pull in writing? What kind of social studies and science, other science concepts to help them to solidify that learning? What about some STEM experiences? Then you've got art, you've got music, you have food. What are some field trips that we want to go on? And I laughingly said this in Mobile the other week that we had just talked about field trips and getting your field trips accepted. And I said, the people that showed up to my group, I said, y'all must want to get your field trips accepted because I'm about to tell you how to get it done. And that was pretty funny. But what are some parent and family engagement things? So these are all different types of areas that you could bring in to discuss seasonal stars or going back to measuring shadows. Okay. After that, we make a list of things that we can do in each one. So, children's literature, I found a book that is just The Moon is Always Round. You can read that. You can pull in all kinds of reading concepts. Math, measured length of shadows. We can go on a field trip to Huntsville Space and Rocket Center. Again, this is just making a list of the different things that you can do. Parent and family engagement, ask them to draw out the moon every night on a calendar. You could journal the moon phase. You could make constellation cookies based on the seasonal appearances. That was an example picture. You can have expert come in and teach any type of concepts. And when you do this, you need to think about your MOUs on that. And then other science concepts like Generation Genius. If you've never heard of this guy, he's pretty awesome. This is something else you could do in a center with students. You could show this whole group, and then at the bottom, it has all these great questions about the video. You've got discussion questions. What do you do before? What do you do after? Here's vocabulary words that you can talk in and pull in. Other reading material, and so forth. So this is a great resource that you guys could use. Generation Genius, sorry. Generation Genius. Some other ideas, obviously you can bring in videos. Here was one on identifying patterns in data. You can go on another field trip to UNA. They have a planetarium. And then another writing prompt, which I think would be pretty cool. I'd love to see, especially your upper grade, maybe your sixth graders, pretend that they are a shadow and describe how you grow. They have to think about, how am I going to grow? Well, I got to think about the sun. What makes a shadow grow? Where am I standing? Where's the sun? Smaller, shorter? How do I get big? Culture, research different cultures and how they use astronomy. You can bring in technology with using interactive games. This was an example. Peeps sees patterns in the sky. This could be for your lower students, but don't feel like you can't give this to higher ones too. They like it as well. So those are just a bunch of ideas that I just started writing out. All the different things I got on, internet, and I did research. A lot of those things I didn't even need to spend money on. It was just all, right here. And then once I think about that, once I get, you got your standard, you have all of the different activities you're going to do. Now it's time for you to think about how I'm going to assess it. So you have two different types of assessment. You got formative, which is just an everyday quick check. What are the vocabulary words? Can they identify patterns in data? What about shadows? Does the child know what a shadow is? Difference between day and night, phases of the moon. And then you got your summative. You've got what happens at the end. What kind of big culminating activity could we do? It's a STEM activity. They could produce and act out a play, build a diorama, or have your parent and family come in to show one of the activities that they've done about this standard. And then you think about your timeline and your lesson plans. So I go back to those specific words from the concept map and I think about a calendar. And then I think about, what do they need to know? What needs to know? What do they need to know in order? They should really know the vocabulary words before we even get into some of these other things. So I put it on a calendar. And I know that my field trip starts May 19th. It's May 19th. I've already had that planned. So then I'm going to basically work backwards. What do I want them to know up to that field trip? And just remember, you're doing one activity a day, one activity a day. And this basically took up the entire month of March. It's done, especially if you have spring break this week. And you've taught them that one standard, but every day you have something that they are working towards. And then you could have also something that you can demonstrate or show to us or upload to Cognia. The reason why you're going on this field trip, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lesson plans, really 10, 11 that correspond with that one field trip. And then when you think about the lesson plan, like I don't want you guys to just recreate the entire wheel. Like it's super simple. We're not asking for a ton of stuff. Um, if your teachers know how to teach, obviously they're good to go. But if they need a little bit more hand holding, you can add in questions and things that they might need as they're working through the lesson plan. So just make it simple. Here's your standard. Analyze data. What date is this on? Which is the lesson? We're going to do the book activity. What is my objective? Now, the objective goes directly with your standard, but it also can bring in your different concepts. So, for this objective, we're going to be reading about the moon, but they're going to learn how to summarize key events from that book. That's a reading standard, right? So, simple. What materials do I need? What is the structure? What is the actual activity? Again, simple. We're going to listen to the story, answer comprehension questions, and they're going to complete the key events graphic organizer. So, going back to making this either simple if you need it or more advanced for those that don't have a foundation in education, you could actually add on here comprehension questions that they could ask before, during, and after. Done for them. And then your assessment, that quick check is going to be that graphic organizer. Can they take what they remember from this text and put it in order? If they can, that's great. Um, Once it's all said and done, it's good to go back and assess the unit plan, thinking about, did I align everything? Is there a balance of teaching strategies? Do we have hands-on? Do we have STEM activities? Are we pulling in culture and cooking and other concept areas? Were the activities sequenced? Okay. Did they need to know actually the phases of the moon a couple of days before? Um, and then were the formative and summative assessments? Did they really measure the knowledge and the skills that you guys were trying to teach? I say this is your turn, but this is something that I can actually send out to everybody. I will give just the unit plan and template. Um, and there's a blank calendar. And then here's a great planning template for just something for you to write in an activity for each one of these things. That way, you know you're kind of hitting all the big concepts and content areas. Blank lesson plan and so forth. Again, we'll get that sent out to you guys. Um, I'll be glad to I'd be glad to sit down or do a Zoom call with any of your teachers if you are interested in doing something like this. And I also think it would be a great resource if y'all did do something like this and we share it and sharing it with everybody else. I mean, you've got months planned if it works. So, again, if you're interested, let me know. I'll be glad to share. Any questions about this? Okay. I think that Erica asked you guys to put your name in the chat so that she knows you're here. And Erica, you want to close out the session? Make
Sure.
sure Amanda's back on if anybody has any questions for her as well.
So since that was so quick, um,
Sorry.
anything else that anybody has any questions about that you need addressed at this time? Everybody's like, no, I want to go home.
While we're on the topic of field trips, don't forget I added the field trip deadlines and the link to submit your field trips into my Friday email, and I'm gonna keep that rolling. As I know we're preparing for summer camp, so just know it's in the email.
I just want to take a minute to tell everyone thank you so much for getting in your data and everything with the 21 APR information. I know there's a few sites that still may be working on a few things, but in general, most people have done a great job, at least from what I've seen. And so I really do appreciate that. Hopefully, we will not have to do this next year. And just remember to make sure that you're going in and speaking with your system, your LEAs, and getting those kids marked as 21st century in your system so that when we pull the data from Power School, it will all be there and you won't have to go in and manually enter things next year, hopefully. So if anyone has any questions about that, please feel free. Other than that, that's all we had today. All right. Thanks, guys. If you have anything in particular you would like us to talk about in our next month's meeting, then please don't hesitate to reach out. We want to make sure that these are beneficial to you and that you're learning something and they're not a waste of your time. So we would love to hear what you want to see or what you want to hear for these type of meetings. All right. Erica, you got anything else?
Sorry, my headphone just fell out of my ear.
Oh, no, I was
No,
just saying, is there anything else you wanted to address?
topics would be great. And we're trying to think about what you're needing at the time, so we're talking about field trips ahead of time. So we might talk about some summer camp stuff coming up, but that's all I got. Y'all have a good week.
Thank you.
Let us know if you have any questions.